In 1985, Japan was the world's memory capital. 5 major firms, NEC, Hitachi, Toshiba, Fujitsu, and Mitsubishi, controlled nearly 80%. The G5 nations met to address a global trade imbalance by driving the value of the dollar down. This chart shows the result. Within 2 years, the yen surged from roughly 240 per dollar toward 120. For a Japanese chipmaker, this meant export prices doubled over that 2-year period, even if nothing changed on the factory floor. Their price advantage was effectively erased by a currency agreement. Simultaneously, Washington launched a trade war. Using Section 301 petitions, the U.S. imposed anti-dumping duties and forced Japan to guarantee that 20% of its domestic market would be reserved for foreign chips. Japan's industrial moat was repriced. Before a single new factory was built elsewhere, the cost of Japanese chips had been geopolitically restructured. To soften the blow of the surging yen, the Bank of Japan cut interest rates. The flood of cheap money created a massive asset bubble, which famously burst at the end of 1989. The ensuing crash left Japanese banks with roughly 100 trillion yen in bad debt. For the next 34 years, the Nikkei stock index would fail to reach its former peak, leaving the country's industrial giants starved for capital. In the memory business, success requires building the next generation of factories during a market downturn to be ready for the next upturn. While Japanese firms cut spending to survive the domestic crash, Korean rivals like Samsung did the opposite. They used counter-cyclical investment to build capacity, taking the global DRAM crown in 1992 and never relinquishing it. Japan's response was a late, bureaucratic consolidation. In 1999, the DRAM divisions of NEC and Hitachi were merged into Elpida. It was less a strategy for growth and more a rescue mission for wounded corporate divisions. Between a frozen credit market and slow corporate decision-making, Japan was pushed out of the high-volume consumer memory market it once owned. This exit is often framed as a total defeat, but the reality is more nuanced. While Japan lost the market for the visible chip, its manufacturers spent the following decades moving into the foundational layers of the supply chain. As profit margins for commodity memory chips thinned, Japanese firms found more resilient positions in the specialized materials and equipment required to make those chips. This diagram shows the shift. Japan surrendered Layer 3, the memory chips, and instead entrenched itself in Layer 5, the materials and chemicals that form the base of the entire industry. Today, Japan controls 90% of the world's advanced photoresists and 95% of the ABF substrate film used in high-end processors. These materials are mandatory choke points. Without them, the fabrication plants in Taiwan, Korea, and the US cannot function. This dominance extends to the hardware itself. Firms like Tokyo Electron and Advancast provide the essential machinery used to etch and test nearly every modern wafer. Japan's story shows that industrial leverage doesn't always reside in the finished product. By controlling the chemicals and equipment at the start of the process, they remain indispensable to a global industry they no longer appear to lead.